but it was also a money-making venture, a huge potential money-making venture, because the spin-offs were basically not just the show, but the photographs from the show could then be used for promotional calendars, for desk diaries, for children's costumes, for games, for those sort of things.
Yeah.
And we could promote medieval products, soaps, perfumes, God knows what. And it got larger and larger, and eventually 60 people or so were involved in a sort of Barnum and Bailey kind of journey through, particularly through Europe, but eventually into America, Australia, Canada, and so on.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it could produce merchandise for kids, and there's a guy in our club called Sean Tucker who said he thinks that Mel Brooks should win the Nobel Peace Prize for movies that he's made, which include Spaceballs, Robin Hood Men in Tights, Young Frankenstein, and
Exactly.
and I Spaceballs made my childhood, and a lot of the other movies that I've seen, like Star Wars, The Lion King, Aladdin, they were so special and important to me. And I think that anybody who's making great stuff for kids deserves a pat on the back, because that when you're a kid, that is the most influential time of your life. And when you have like all this beauty when you're a kid, that carries forward through the difficulty of growing older, getting more mature, taking on more responsibility, seeing that things are not quite as good in the outside world as you may have thought when you were a kid in your house, seeing nice movies. But that love that you feel in the beginning, for me, has certainly helped, restore my faith in the goodness of the world, or the goodness of myself, many times.
Well, I think everybody wants to be, at times, in a fantastic world. They want to travel outside their own environment, and children's costumes enable you to do that. Very recently I was in Scotland, and I was in Archer and Hadrian's Wall, and there were a whole load of little Romans, and little kids all dressed up as Romans, and carrying Roman swords and little Roman helmets and everything, and that was all part of it. But the problem of like many of the ideas that we've come up with, we were undercapitalized. We never had enough money to really lie back on our own laurels, so we were basically selling and at the same time spending for the next wave of whatever it happened to be. And that was the first shock for me, was that basically by the end of 1974 there was a very serious recession in England, and I knew I had to sell horses and trucks and get out of the business, because I knew that we couldn't carry on. And that led briefly to a period of about a 5-year period working where I sold my company, and I allied it with a very large architectural engineering kind of company in London. And the client base became different. It was no longer purely an entertainment client. Became somewhat industrial client. And then, but I speak languages, I speak other languages, and I became, in this company, international director. And that meant that I started traveling in places like Africa.
Did the languages come from being in Europe, or did you have to spend extra time learning extra languages?
No, I think, if you live in England or you live on the edge of the continent, the next country next door is like Florida to Alabama.
Okay.
So if you imagine Alabama, they spoke French instead of English, there's a good chance that more people would speak French who live here in Florida.
Right.
I went to a school where you learn French and German and Spanish and Latin and Greek.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my early travel, which were very much, I'd lived with a German family, for example, when I was only 16. And I travelled by bicycle through a good part of sort of Central Europe. That set me up to the idea that it wouldn't be so bad if you could learn more than one language. And so I learned French and I learned German, and later on I learned Greek and Italian, and to some extent Norwegian, because at one moment I was going to study medieval languages.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think you have to have a good ear.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be sort of somewhat of a songster
Mm-hmm.
as well to be able to pick it up.
Yeah, and it's unique of you. I mean, the full package is not just the languages, but being so well read, having. I've seen some of your drawings for your architecture.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Having this creative spark, and it shows me that it takes all types to make the world go round. Because these skills that you possess, all of the ones that I just mentioned, I don't have at all. I'm not good at drawing,
well,
and
I'm quite seriously missing a lot of skills myself. So, each of us has our own contribution to make.